Welcome, everyone. A warm welcome to you to Enterprise Agility Champs. This is our February event, obviously, and we have an amazing speaker here. I'm going to talk more about the speaker in a few minutes, but the topic is extremely important and a very interesting topic, which is how to create a feedback-rich culture. I think all of us have been in organizations or teams where this is a missing element where you're not getting adequate feedback on time, especially with traditional formats where the person you reported to would give feedback to you at the end of the year, and it's like useless, right? Because the whole year has passed by. The more agile modern ways of working is where you get feedback on a more real time, or at least as soon as possible, and everything around agile is dependent on feedback. That's the bloodline of agile. We want feedback early so that we can act on it, but unfortunately that's not the situation, right? And there are the three questions which was in the flyer that you might have seen. I'm going to read those out. How often have you seen an organization react to situations only to realize it's too late? And that's because feedback comes so late sometimes, right? And then, do people in your organization feel comfortable giving feedback to others? Does the organization or leadership always value the feedback and act on them? Today we have Pradeepa Narayanaswamy, who is coming to us from Texas. She is an executive and leadership coach, and her philosophy in life has always been to let others dream bigger than they ever have, and then let them to achieve those. She helps her clients in transformation through coaching, mentoring, and also helping them to create a culture of feedback. Pradeepa is not only our speaker for today, she is also my personal coach and mentor. So I'm super excited to have Pradeepa with us today. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming Pradeepa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Toby. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. So excited to be here, everybody. Thank you, Toby. I really appreciate you. Toby reached out to me, I think sometime last month, and asked like, hey, Pradeepa, we want to have you on, and what would you like to speak, right? And I said I wanted to speak about feedback, because often, like Toby mentioned, oftentimes that's an area where I have seen a lot of organizations struggle in so many aspects, right? And I actually wanted to walk you through a personal experience of mine on how feedback played a very important role in transforming myself, and why I'm very passionate about speaking about this topic. Right. And, Kanessa has volunteered to look at the chat window and, look at the questions and interrupt me. But if there are any questions, anybody, please unmute yourself. And I would love to hear from you. Right. Because I'm not going to be a talking head. I like to talk to you. Right. I want this to be a conversation. So let's have a conversation here. So with that being said, let me just share my screen. And if you can tell me, if one of you can just give me a thumbs up, I would appreciate that. Fantastic. All right. So we are going to be talking about how to create a feedback-rich culture, right? I know there's a bunch of you are here. Just quickly in the chat window, if you can tell me what role are you playing in your current organization, I would really appreciate that. Would just give me an idea. Okay, so we have coaches, scrum masters, trainers, coaches, product manager. All right. What else? RTE, yeah, software developer, fantastic. Agile coach, all right. Accounting manager, I like that. All right. Supply chain demand planner. All right, Agile coach, Scrum master. All right, fantastic. So I kind of get a perspective where y'all are coming from. So here is me. One second, let me just close the chat window here. So here's me. I know Toby already introduced me, but I really care about, coaching leaders and executives. And I started focusing at that level because what I realized was when a leader transforms and changes within, what I have seen is his or her whole organization changes with them. And to me, that has been the most effective way to transform an organization, right? Because I don't even go and talk about agility. I go talk about, what is their leadership? How do they want to be a better leader, right? Like how do we want to take them from good to a great leader? And when that kind of conversations start to happen, and when they start aligning with their own values, automatically the transformation happens from within. And as soon as the transformation happens from within, they are starting to look at like, okay, now I'm in charge of this whole area or this department or whole organization. How do I take them forward? How do I move my organization forward, right? And one effective way for that to happen is getting that feedback, right? Like having that feedback, having that reflection has been extremely crucial. Apart from that, I've been an Agilist for, my goodness, 20 years now, 21 years going on. And that's just how I live my life, right? Like I don't teach Agile. I'm being Agile in my life. That's how I live. That's how I lead my life. I don't like go by the books in any of those aspects. I'm very pragmatic in nature. What that means is I meet the organization and people where they are and try to move them from that spot on. You can find my talk in TedX. I had the opportunity to speak at a TedX conference. And also I published a couple of books, and my latest book is Loving Myself and You, which is available in Amazon. So just a little bit about me. So I want you to think about this question for a second. This can be, you could have either been a receiver or a giver, right? It doesn't matter. So think about in your past, very recent past, where you have to either give or get feedback, right? That was a little bit difficult. And in one word, in the chat window, type in, how did you feel about that? Anxious, okay. Confused, all right. Frustrated, okay. Comfortable, all right. Unsure, okay. Unclear. What else? Keep it coming. Sad, okay. Clarity versus confusion. I'm assuming it's not clear. I'm confused. Hesitant. All right, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm hesitant. Demotivating. Alka, thank you. All right, keep it optimistic. Nessa, I like that. That's a good word. Giving feedback, encouraging. Okay. All right, so let's keep that coming. Hopeless. Ooh, Ricardo, that's interesting. I wanted to tell you a story. So this happened 11 years ago. At that time, I was working for a small boutique company and a consulting company, and I was a principal Agile consultant. And I've been there for a while, and my responsibility is to go serve different clients that we have from the Agile perspective. One fine evening, my boss, he called me into his room, right? And I went there. It was just before we were about to leave. And I went there and I sat. He asked me to sit down, so I sat. And he said, Pradeepa, I wanted to give you some feedback that I heard from other people, right? And that was like oh, okay, right? I wasn't sure. I didn't even have time to react to that. It kind of came as a pretty big surprise for me. And he told me, which I will never forget, Pradeepa, I've been getting, people have been sharing with me that, you've been abrasive, right? You've been abrasive. And in that split second, I just froze, because one, it just came pretty unexpected. There was no, what do you mean by abrasive, right? Can you tell me more? And for that, I can't share details, but I've been hearing complaints from people that you've been abrasive. And I was like, somebody said, right? It was unclear for me. What do you mean by abrasive, right? And for a second, I have to even think okay, I know abrasive is not a very pleasant word. It's not a good word. What the heck abrasive means? Because I was kind of taken back and I was shocked. I actually have to go back and look into the dictionary. What is abrasive, right? Because I was really shocked and I couldn't even take it in, what that means. What is that? What did I do? And it was not a pleasant experience for me getting that feedback, right? And like many of you said, I was really confused, because there was one, I did not know what I exactly did that was termed as abrasive, right? I was not given any factual data, right? At this instance, you did something like this, or you said something like this, that was in turn taken as being abrasive, right? It was very vague. It was very unclear. And also, right, the setting itself, I felt really at that time when I was told, I did not know how to react to that, right? It felt really unsafe for me. And I thought, what should I do with this? Right? I was so confused. What do you want me to do? Right? I couldn't ask that question because I was still shell-shocked by that feedback itself. But then inside me, I was so confused. What should I be doing? What do I want to do with this? How do I go about this? Right? Are there people, I started telling stories myself, are there people working against me here? Right? Why am I not hearing it from the person itself? Right? Why am I hearing it through my boss? Right? And my boss is not also, I couldn't tell him. I asked, would you be able to tell me who said that? And he said, no, he can't. What else can I think about this, right? It's very, very unclear for me, right? So it was definitely not a helpful conversation as a receiver, right? One, I never felt safe in that situation. It was just dropped on me just like that, right? And there was no factual data to support that, right? It was just oh, I'm abrasive. What does that mean? What do you mean by that? What did I do wrong, right? I have to start going into that spiral. And I really did not understand, right? Because I was not given a clear explanation. I really did not understand. And then there was a part in me that started fearing, right? And I'm not going to deny that. I started fearing, what does this mean? Is this going to be a problem for me? Is this going to be a problem for my job? Is this going to be whatever, right? Is what kind of problems I'm looking at? And it started creating that fear in me. And of course, because I was so confused about this feedback and I really did not know what contributed to this, I was completely unclear. What should I do with this? What do I want to do with this? Right? And I actually I don't even remember what I said to my boss at that time. And I said, I'm assuming I said thank you, and I left. And for the next couple of days, it was really horrible experience for me personally, because I got this feedback. Of course, the word abrasive is not a great word. I did have to go look into the dictionary, right? And what do I want to do with that, right? And that put me in a very difficult spot, right? And That was not a good spot to be in. So I wanted to turn it back to you for a second. I'll pause my story there. That's where I was, right? And in your life so far, if somebody comes to you and tells you, I have some feedback for you, right? What goes in your mind? If somebody tells you today, like, I have some feedback for you, how would you react to that? Feel free to talk to me as well, unmute.
I would be anxious.
Anxious, yeah. Tell me more.
You said just a blank statement saying they have feedback for me, right?
Right.
I would be anxious. I don't know what the topic is. I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know what area of my work or area of discussion it's pertaining to. So
yeah, absolutely.
If I know what it is, I'll be anxious.
Even if you know what it is, would you be anxious?
I could still be, I guess, depending on what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I see a hand right there. Vijay?
Okay. First of all, instead of overreacting, I will just give a big smile, whoever is giving the feedback to me. And I will ask, what made him to think like that? That is my first question. Then everything will start rolling from there. So because everybody has the perspective, and I appreciate that perspective, and the story behind that perspective might be true or might be wrong. We don't know. So I will start with a big smile.
Okay, starting with a big smile. Awesome. All right. Augustine.
I'm sure I get myself up here. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, and I think that I think if you would have asked me this question maybe 3 years ago, my reaction would have been scared, fearful, fear, just because of where I was.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot since then, right? And I took a lot of cues from what you used to do, right? The little that I spent with you, right? I think that as Agile coaches, we have the right to seek feedback proactively and don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness in a respectful way. So I got to tell you, in the past 3 years, I don't encounter these surprises because I don't want to be surprised. So I kind of like learn my lesson, right? Not to be in those positions where you're trying to do the good job, you're trying to help the teams, you want them to grow, you want them to get to the next maturity level. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, hey, Augustine, you're being a little bit terse with the people. Hey, Augustine, hold on for a second. You asked me to do something, and this is when I'm gonna get it back in the same performance review. So you gotta, it's like, I don't know if it's an American saying, you gotta grab the bulls by the horn sometimes and really navigate and make that journey your own. Don't let someone else tell you what that outcome is going to be for you in a feedback that, like, what? So anyway, so my thing is that, yes, I think initially I would think like, oh my God, like, what did I do wrong? Like you said.
Yeah.
But don't allow yourself to be placed in that position, right? So you have to like think ahead. It's like chess. Yeah. You got to know your moves. Next move. You need to know your pawns, right? Whether you have a bishop, whether you have a king, you have to know how to move those pawns. And those pawns are not pawns per se, are the relationships you have and the engagements you have, and proactively, right? Proactively tell your manager, this is the feedback that I'm getting. Here you go, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Awesome. Thank you, Augustine. Pete?
I was just going to toss in that I'm realizing as I think through this that it really depends on who says that to me.
Yeah.
So I have some people that, like, I know them, they know me. If they come and say, I have some feedback for you, I'm like, ooh, great, I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah.
And I've also had some managers in the past, who I did not trust. And they came to me with, like, I have some feedback for you. Now I'm like, oh my God, okay, now what's going to happen? Because I don't know which direction this could go. And I think that for me, it really depends on who's saying it.
Depends on the person. Yeah, awesome. Karen?
Yes, hi. So I think it also has a lot to, I think the who is important, but also how experienced they are as a people manager. Yeah. Because I definitely run into situations where I constantly solicit feedback, say, I don't feel like I'm being really effective, or I'm not influencing as much as I would like to. Is there anything that you see that I can improve on? Like things like that. And I've had managers who are like, yep, you're great. And then review time, they're like, oh, here's some things that we don't like. So there, unfortunately, you can be very open to feedback, but sometimes those managers aren't as good at providing it.
Yeah, it's an art, right? Absolutely. Like Pete said, who's giving me that feedback, right?
Yes. Yes, I at one point was a restaurant manager, but I'd also been like a bartender, waitress, and I got in the habit of asking for a manager to give them positive feedback on my experience, because as a manager, usually they only get called when things are negative. And so they'd show up and they're like, oh, what kind of free stuff do I need to give her? How can I make this person happy? And I say, you know what? I've just had a really great experience and I wanted you to know. And immediately their whole demeanor changes.
Yeah.
So I think that we're so used to getting negative feedback that positive feedback is more, you almost get more anxious because of that than you would negative.
Exactly, right? Like, I'll just share, and Toby, before I let you speak, I just share something very, very quickly, right? As a manager myself, right? Like, I'll talk a little bit about how do I do this and how I'm being a manager, right? Trying to create a feedback-rich culture within my team, within my influence. Even with that, right? Like when I say like, hey, can I share something with you? Automatically people's brain, one of my employees said like, and I said that we have a great relationship, we have a clear agreement, this is how we wanted to share and give feedback with each other. Even then the first reaction comes like, oh no, this is going to be bad, right? That's exactly what they said, right? And people automatically assume when they hear, that's why I just left it like that, can I give you some feedback, or I have some feedback? Automatically people's mind goes to, this is going to be bad, right? Toby.
Yeah, actually I was going to say the totally opposite of that. As a coach, we are trained to, or we have learned that sandwich style feedback is not good, right? Where you start off by saying something good only so that you can insert something constructive, which the person may actually constitute as negative.
Yeah.
And in my hope always is when somebody says, hey, I have some feedback for you, I'm actually looking for negative feedback because, especially like, right after a presentation or after an event or something like that, there are a lot of people giving you praises, but you actually are craving or wanting, where can I do better? And there are fewer people who are actually giving you that kind of constructive feedback. So to answer your question, my first reaction is, I hope this person is not going to sandwich it. And number two, I hope I get some constructive feedback that I can learn from.
Yeah.
A slightly different paradigm. It's because of the biases we employ sometimes, right?
Absolutely. But the majority of the people in any organization that we support, right? Like when we talk about feedback, right? Like, can I give you some feedback? The reactions are exactly the words that you just shared, right? Like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is this bad, right? Because how do we associate feedback, right? We typically tend to associate feedback like this, right? It's the same thing. If you're standing in front of a fierce lion, you know that lion is going to kill you, right? The same feeling when you look at this lion, imagine or pretend a lion in front of you. The same feeling is what we get when we hear those exact words, right? Yeah. both of them are coming from the same place.
Right, it's the amygdala hijack, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's that fear situation, right? Like it's where I was frozen when my manager told me that, like, Pradeepa, you're, I'm going to give you some feedback and you are abrasive, right? Like I was shocked because that was something that was quite unexpected. Because what we start to think about is it's not just about the feedback that we are getting. What's the consequence of this? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my life? Am I going to lose, right? Like we are thinking about all the negative things that can happen, the emotions that we associate with this that causes the churn in our stomach, right? Because somehow we always associate feedback as a bad thing, right? Just like how I'm going to get killed by a lion, it's going to be as bad as that, if not even worse than that, right? So when I read about this, right, like a while ago in a blog, that really, really resonated with me. That's exactly how I felt, right? And right, wrong, or indifferent, there are people now transform. By the way, I am very comfortable with feedback. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago now, right? And I'll talk about how I create a culture of feedback in my area of influence. But Pradeepa was like this, right? Like 10 years ago, I was so scared. I was so, caught by surprise, right? And that's very, very common. And that's really, really common. So when we talk about, right, like people are being so scared, people are, fearful of receiving feedback. People think feedback is something so bad, so negative. People are anxious to get feedback, right? When all these negative things are associated with the feedback, how the heck, pardon my language, how can we create a feedback-rich culture, right? How is that even possible? Because the word feedback throws a lot of people away, right? So I'll continue my story here, right? So after I heard that, right, like I went, and next couple of days were really miserable for me personally. And then this is what I decided to do, right? I took it for the face value. And I actually went and, set up one-on-one meetings with a lot of my colleagues at that time, like really, a random set of colleagues. It's not just the people that I trust, random set of colleagues. And I actually started having a very, personal conversation with them. Like, hey, here is a feedback that I got, right? The word abrasive was used. And can you help me, right? Like, have you seen me in situations where I have come across as abrasive from your perspective, right? And I went around and had that conversation with multiple people. And then number two, right? For whatever reason, I went into the internet and I started searching for, like, how do I fix my abrasiveness, right? I will take it to its face value. Somebody said it, so there has to be some truth to it, right? I'm not going to defend or deny that I'm not abrasive. So how do I help myself not be abrasive? And the best I could do at that time, right, wrong, or indifferent, was to get a speech coach, right? A speech coach. And I actually hired a speech coach, and I worked with them for like 10 to 12 sessions, I believe, right? So they came into my office and they really helped me. I don't know whether that really helped me with my abrasiveness or not, but it had so much of help with how I started speaking, how I really slowed down, how I stopped using filler words, right? Like the things that speech coaches are really, really known for. And I actually went to my manager and told him, like, hey, I'm going to be hiring a speech coach and I'm going to be working with them because, I take the feedback seriously. And he was very impressed with that fact. He actually paid for my speech coaching, which I didn't ask for it, but he actually ended up paying for it because I took that initiative on my own, right? What I did not do was I did not sit and mope around, right? I did not try to find who that person is, even though there was a small thought that went for me, like who would have said something like that, right? Why would they have said something like that? But that was not a helpful place to be, right? Because it just takes me to the past and it was not helping me move forward, right? What I did to move forward is, okay, I'm going to have some conversations with the people and see what kind of data and perspectives, facts that I wanted to collect, right? Because for me, it has to be some factual data. It's not somebody felt this way about me, right? Like, where did I do this? And I've actually created some accountability partners who I really trust, saying that like, hey, if you see me express myself in an abrasive way, I want you to tell me after the fact, because I want to know what that is, because I may not be knowing what that is, right? So can you show me the mirror, right? So that's something that I did. I went and, hired a coach that it was an amazing decision, whether it helped with my abrasiveness or not, but I'm glad I worked with a speech coach, right? So it doesn't matter. What I learned was it really doesn't matter, right, where that feedback came from and in what form it came from. It was a huge lesson for me from that instance on, right? How I started seeing feedback, right? So one thing that I really learned, and I know some of you already chimed in on, is think about this list as something either as a giver and a getter, right? It doesn't matter, as a giver and a getter. Here, I wrote it from both the perspective, right? I think some of you already chimed in. Ever since that instance, 11 years ago, I never wait for feedback to be given. Because to me, that was a huge lesson that any type of feedback can come at any point in time. It's my responsibility to be proactive, right? And practice asking for feedback, because it's not easy, right? Because oftentimes, like I showed the picture of the lion, we associate feedback to mostly the opportunities, right? The constructive criticisms, right? Unless we practice asking for feedback, we are not going to do that. We are not going to get it. And another thing, I think, Kinessa, you said it beautifully there, right? We often associate feedback with negative. But guess what? If we create a culture where you are generously giving both positives and negatives, a feedback is just a feedback. Something you did really, really well, or something, you can do differently next time, right? So having that understanding, having that agreement, and creating an environment where you are generous in both aspects. If you're only giving positive feedback and you're reserving negative feedback, then you are not doing justice, right? Because as a leader, as a coach, as an influencer, like whatever role that you are playing, you wanted to have both equals, right? Giving that equally to people is really, really critical, right? And I did not do a good job with my boss at that time asking for factual data, right? Hence, I ended up going and having these one-on-one meetings, trying to get the facts by myself, right? So if you are given a feedback and if there are no facts associated with that, ask for it. Hey, can you give me an example? You just told me I did something poorly. Can you give me a specific instance or an example? That way I can relate to it, right? Or if you are going to give feedback to somebody, right, especially on improvement opportunities, make it factual, both positive and negative. Hey, at this presentation, when you talked about this point, I saw everybody's eyes lit up, right? That was a very awesome thing that you did. So continue, talk from that perspective, right? Make sure that they understand what you are appreciating them for. And make sure they understand what you are criticizing them for, right? Give the exact feedback. If it's not factual, then it's just something that you are making up. It doesn't have that same weightage, right? This is something that I worked really hard, building my muscle to receive feedback, right? I go and proactively ask for feedback. It's not just asking for feedback. I also want to be in the right mindset to receive it, right? I think Siva, I don't know, one gentleman said, like, sorry, I may be messing up your name. You said it, right? Like, I start with a smile, right? Having a right mindset and building that muscle, whether it's going to be a positive feedback or a not so positive feedback, that's really, really important. And the next one is role modeling it, right? You can't create a feedback-rich culture unless you are role modeling it for your team, for your organization, for your department, right? And I do that, right? With all my team members, with my boss, everybody that I work with, right? I actually dedicate a time, and every quarter, that's my cadence actually, every quarter, I spend one-on-one time and I give them enough time and I send them a detailed email on what I'm looking for. And that's my time to receive feedback. All I will do is thank them for coming, and I shut up my mouth, I take my notebook and pen, and I start writing everything that they're telling me, right? And I ask them for the whole breadth. Tell me one thing that I'm doing really well from your perspective, and give me an example. Tell me one thing that I have to improve upon from your perspective, and please give me an example, specific example, right? And how else can I support you, serve you, whatever, right? 3 questions, that's it, right? Half an hour, and I let 25 minutes of the time, they will talk, I will take notes. I'm not going to defend, I'm not going to justify, I'm not going to tell them like why that is wrong and I'm right? Like, no. Because if I'm asking for feedback, my responsibility is to just observe it, right? And most importantly, if I'm role modeling it, it's not just asking for feedback. What am I going to do with that, right? For whatever it's worth. Because if the person is dedicating time and energy and giving you something meaningful, right? What are you going to do with that? So I will take the time, I will thank them, I will take the time, go off, and I will think about something, how I want to address that, and I will come back and communicate with that person. Hey, here's what I'm going to do, right? And I'm not going to act on all the feedback, right? I will act on things that I think is necessary. And rest of the feedback, I would say, thank you so much, I appreciate it, right? So that's another thing. Not just because a feedback is given doesn't mean that you have to act on everything, right? So act on things that matters, right? Even though if it is difficult, right? Like some people are saying like, oh, it's a difficult one. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to act. No, that's where the great opportunity is, right? And make sure whomever gives you that feedback, you communicate back to them as to how you are going to act on it, or why you are not going to act on it. That's really important, right? And last but not the least, this is something I always worked with the coach for the past 7 years, and I'll continue to work with my coach, right? Like, because for me, a coach really helps me build my feedback muscles, right? I always tell him, right? Like he shows my blind spots. Right? It's a he for me right now. He shows my blind spots, right? And he calls me out on my BS, right? So, of course, it's a very safe space. And through that mechanism, I have really built myself to receive feedback, right? No matter what. And sometimes he's very blunt with me, right? But it's the way how I have decided to receive it, right? Because the onus is on me. The ownership is on me, right? Because we can go around and ask like, okay, if you want to create a culture, should there be a policy? Should there be something that's department wide? No, it starts with us, right? We can start by ourselves, right? And then slowly start to organically spread it. Because if people start, and I've done this so many times, and I have seen how it latches on to other people, right? People automatically start to follow this. Oh, it's not bad, right? It's not bad. And especially if you are giving equal importance to both the positive things and the negative things, right? Then it becomes easier. And when you are role modeling it for them, this is how you are going to take feedback from other people. This is how you're going to act feedback from other people. And it doesn't have to be that scary to begin with, right? I'll pause here for a second. What questions you may have? And I'm not monitoring the chat, so Kinessa, if there are any questions there.
No questions just yet.
Okay.
Toby, oh no, Ricardo just added one. Okay, so, he says, are we self-aware enough to choose what to act on and what to put aside, or should we ask others to help us with that task?
That's a great question, Ricardo, right? Like, it depends. It really depends, right? So if a feedback is given, and if you think it is important to act on, right? Because other people will always have perspectives, right? For myself, I'll share just my perspective. For myself, will ask myself, right? Like if I want to take this to its face value, and if I wanted to do something about this, what would that mean? Right? Like why this would be important, right? So that self-reflection, because again, remember, a feedback has to come with facts, right? It's going to be factual data, right? You can also, this is something that I have done, right? Like somebody presented a fact for me with my feedback, and I actually sometimes want to go back and test it out, right? Like, am I doing this, right? Like I want to validate that for myself. And I have done that too, right? Before going and acting on it, right? The second time when am I doing this, I am more self-aware, right? So maybe I may not be doing exactly the same thing because I already heard that feedback and I'm already acting on it in a way that I'm showing up now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. We've got one more statement in the chat before you go, Vijay. I see you there. Yeah. What about the case if it's the person's being biased, kind of how they're taking you versus how you're actually speaking?
Exactly. That's a great point, because this was something my speech coach said to me at that time, right? And I was so worried about, like, how am I being abrasive, right? Like because I tend to be nicer to people. I generally don't consider myself abrasive, although somebody's used that specific term, right? So take it for the face value, right? I don't have to get too attached or too, upset about what's being told. What do I want to do with this, right? How do I want to own it, right? Because if somebody says something about us, there is always a small percentage of truth to it, right? Otherwise, people won't just say things like that. So what is the truth, and how do I want to own it? It's not about defending myself. Is the word abrasive right? Is that the right way to describe Pradeepa's behavior? No. Then we are going in the wrong direction there, at least for me personally, right? Whatever is said is said. What's my responsibility as a person as an employee, as a leader? How do I want to act on that? And what is that something that I want to own, right? So that has been a critical differentiation for me, because my speech coach did tell me, like, there may be some bias going on. That's why when I read that, right, like there may be some bias going on because my interacting with you, you don't come across as abrasive. She said all those things, right? And I heard her, but I don't want to just take it like what she said. Like, okay, something is already been said. What is that something I can do? Right? So that's the ownership that I brought into that equation.
Yes. Okay, VJ.
Okay. I was hearing, Pradeepa, I think your story.
Yes.
I think you handled the situation maturely, so that it led to a good coach, and it's good to hear that you improved a lot. If in my case, this is my own personal perspective, I might be wrong also. Before solving or searching for a solution, I always make sure, does that problem really exist? So first I will look for that. If I convinced that the problem really exists within me or within the system, then I will go for hunting the solution. After listening to your story, I didn't see any problem there. Okay, so maybe it might be a typical example of a biased feedback. So that's what I felt. I might be wrong also.
See, I don't know that either, right?
Okay.
I don't know that either, right? So this is right, wrong, or indifferent. Vijay, this is how I decided to own that, right? Because what I did not want to do is either dismiss that, like, I'm not that person. Who are you to tell me, right? I don't want to dismiss that because it's already been said, right? Like it's there. And that was the first time that I'm hearing that. So I was also intrigued by that, and I was also interested by that, like, wow, like where is that coming from, right? That's why I said it may be completely biased. It may be somebody's perspective. It may be completely wrong. I don't know. If I start going down that route, I actually started thinking about it, like, who would have said that? Why would have said that? Why they would have said that? What do they have against me, right? I started going there, but then I stopped very quickly, Vijay, and realized, you know what? That's not going to be helpful, especially for me. And I actually wanted to move forward from there, right? How do I wanted to move forward? That's how I owned it at that time, right? Will I handle the exact same situation the same way? Probably not, right? I would have pushed for more facts, right? I would have asked my boss to give me examples. I would have asked him, it was a him at the time, right? I would have asked him, tell me the different instances where I have come across abrasive, and I would have requested to speak with that person. Because to me, another, things, I will actually go to the next slide here. Things that I typically avoid is, I typically don't like to go through hierarchy, right? Oftentimes, people are not comfortable giving somebody feedback to their face. They go to their boss, right? They go to their boss, and the boss come to them and say, like, hey, I heard this feedback from this person or whomever, right? In my case, my boss didn't reveal where the feedback came from, right? So things I generally avoid.
Yeah, I got one more question. And that is, how can a person keep a check on their inner voice when they're receiving that feedback? So how did you get to a place where you're receiving that feedback, no matter how it's delivered to you, but turning it into a positive thing?
Yeah, that's why I said, right? Like, it's about not thinking there is a lion in front of me that's going to eat me, right? It's a feedback. right? That's why constantly offering, let me go back to this slide here, feedback can be both positive and negative. And if we build the muscle and proactively ask on a regular basis, it's just a part of your life, right? It's part of your professional life, right? How often do we do that? Oftentimes we don't, right? We wait for something really bad to happen and we decide to tell people, right? So, or only offering or seeking negative feedback, like I said, like we have to do the praise as well, right? We have to give equal importance to praises as well as to criticisms, right? And not make it generic, right? You can't just like, oh, I have a feeling that you are doing a bad job. What the heck? You just have a feeling that somebody is doing a bad job. What does that even mean? Right? What are the facts? Right? Yes. And never ever, like, Toby said this, right? Like, I do not like anybody doing a feedback sandwich. That's positive, negative, positive, right? It just ruins it, because when you start saying positive and then you start saying something, people know that, like, okay, just give it to me, right? Because that's not a good, I don't know who invented that. That's a very bad way. And also never sugarcoat it, right? Because if you are sugarcoating it, you are actually making it less important, right? It's also a tactic to give honest, direct. It doesn't have to be mean, with facts.
Less impactful.
It's more impactful, and be genuine about it, right? And the reason I put feedback hijack is I had a feedback session with my manager where she was giving me her feedback, right? And while in the middle of it, right, without giving me enough opportunity, she immediately put me on spot and said, like, give me feedback now. I gave you feedback, you give me feedback right now, right? And I pushed back and said, like, you know what? This is my time to receive feedback. I haven't prepared anything. I haven't thought through this, and I don't want to just blah with you, right? So when you are having a feedback session, do not hijack it, or do not allow the other person to hijack it, because some people think that if you ask them for a feedback, then they have to ask you for a feedback immediately, right? And blissful ignorance, that's one of my favorite, right? Like, oh, I'm getting a feedback, but I don't even want any feedback, so I'm just going to ignore asking for feedback.
Right.
Pradeepa,
I just want to let you know that we're running low on time.
Okay.
So,
all right. Absolutely. So we already talked about this, right? Don't avoid this, because oftentimes we associate it with being hard. It doesn't have to be hard, right? And this is something that I realized, right? Like, this was a big insight or an aha moment in one of my coaching sessions, right? You can't make somebody get feedback or, ask for feedback, right? What I realized was you can't push someone over their own evolution. People have to evolve on their own. No policy or processes can make anybody do this, right? So that's why I keep coming back to, how do you create a culture? It starts with you. So here's my call to action for all of you, right? Pick one person in your life. It doesn't have to be in your professional life, right? Because if you want to start, creating and building that muscle, you have to start with acting on it, right? So if you haven't done so this year, ask a person in your life to give you some honest feedback. And don't just ask, give me feedback, because that's so general, right? Tell me how I'm doing in this area, or what is that something, make sure that you are targeting an area that you want to focus on and ask for it. You will be really surprised what people give you. Right? So that's pretty much it. Here is my last slide, and I will send this to you. I wanted to give away to the audience 3 copies of my new book. And of course, you have to live in the United States here. All you have to do is just email me at hello@pradeepa.coach and tell me why you want the book. The name of the book is called Loving Myself and You. Sorry, I forgot to mention that there. And also, if you're interested, I'm giving away $100 off of my group coaching program. So only for 2 people in this group. So if you're interested, check it out. And of course, I will send the deck to Toby. So you'll have all those information and link in there. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Pradeepa, for just kind of gracing us with your lovely words and encouragement. I think we can all take away how feedback shouldn't be something that you get on a time scale, but it's something that should kind of be continuous. And whether it be positive or negative, you kind of take it how you want it. So the choice is ours.
Absolutely. And I'm like, I think Toby mentioned this. I'm happy to stay. I know many of you may have to drop off, but if there are any pressing questions, I'm happy to stay for a little bit and answer anything for y'all.
Okay, really quick, I'm going to make an announcement. Our next up is going to be March 31st, and it's called Are You Ready for Some Agile Entertainment? And it's going to be Dom Humchai, and he will be here to give us some interesting, entertaining ways to learn different Agile processes. So
it's actually edutainment.
Oh, edutainment? Oh.
Yeah, that's a new word. So you're educating and you're learning.
And I read Entertrained as well, and I was like, that's a cool,
yeah,
that's a really cool thing too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yep, that will be amazing. So again, thank you, Pradeepa. Thank you everyone for coming in. If you have some more questions, please feel free to ask, and definitely don't forget to join Enterprise Agility Champs. You look at behind Toby, he's got the board up there. Join us out on a meetup, and I hope to see you guys next month.
We just hit 200 members this
Woo-hoo!
week.
That's fantastic. I see Vijay's hand is up. Vijay, do you have a question?
Yeah. I was kind of the things to avoid slide number 14, I believe. There was one comment, sandwich.
Yes.
I think I'm not sure what the context behind putting that point there, but even I practiced the sandwich approach, and it works amazingly fine with me. But only thing is how you do it is what matters. So I follow this rule. 3:1 rule. I will follow usually. Even I'll play that rule on myself and with my spouse and my kids. Exactly, and it works amazingly fine. Before giving any feedback, you collate all 3 good things about your spouse. Let's say you are talking to your spouse and you want to get things done, one good things. So don't quote it as a feedback, okay? Quote it as a improvement. Hey honey, this is I found 3 good things about you, and there is 1 improvement about you. So she will happily listen all those 3 good things about her. Okay? And don't tell you are giving a feedback. You tell it's an improvement. Improvement is a key word here. Tell 1 good improvement area, first 3 good things and 1 improvement area. That's it.
Yeah.
And that works fine. Okay. So even even you may go back practice with your kids or your spouse or colleagues. That works amazingly fine. Okay. So that's where that what you can see sandwich approach works better. And even you can seek the same pattern or the same pattern from the colleagues or approach. You can give me the feedback with this pattern. 3 good things about me and 1 improvement.
Yeah. As long as there is that understanding there, and your spouse or whomever you are giving it to are receptive to that, that is totally fine, right? One of the reason why I put the sugar coating or feedback sandwich is oftentimes it's been forced, right? I actually wanted to give you something not great, but I'm going to use this technique. So I myself find myself ease into giving that negative, right? So it's very forced. That's why I said, right, like in the things to do, being positive, be genuine about it, right? Like whether you are giving a positive feedback or a negative feedback, as long as it's something that you're genuine about it, people would often appreciate that, right? The forcing is what I don't like, especially in the feedback sandwich. And I have oftentimes seen it being done really, really poorly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm kind of agree. So when some person give you 3 good things about you, okay, they really need to find good things in you. So
exactly.
If they are sugarcoating or if they are telling something else about something which is you are not. Suppose if someone says, hey, you are so beautiful and you looks like Aishwarya Rai. Okay, buddy, I got you. So I know you. So where are you coming from? So that's how we will come to know whether they are really telling the 3 good things about you or not. They are putting the sugar coat on it. So momentarily you will come to know one improvement what they are telling. That's also going to be a plain lie.
Yeah,
so that's how that person within a minute you will able to know whether really you are trying to solve the problem or not.
Yeah.
Can I add a point here, Pradeepa, with your permission?
Yes, please.
So, Vijay, one thing that I have seen that has worked for me is asking for permission to give feedback.
Yes.
Right. So when you actually tell, like Pradeepa told her story and said, her boss said, "Hey, I have some feedback for you." That is fine, that is just basically setting the context. But when you sit down to have a conversation with someone, asking them very clearly, "Hey, I have some feedback for you. Do I have your permission to share that feedback?" And it might seem like a silly question to ask because you already said that. But then what it does is that it creates a contract between you and that person. So during that, think of it as a transaction, right? That conversation is a transaction. And you have taken that person's permission just for that time box to give feedback to that person.
Yeah.
And it creates, like I said, it creates a contract. And now it creates a psychological safety for you to openly say things. And you want to also get that reciprocation that the person you are giving the feedback to is also open to feedback. And just the way you started, I think it's important to close it as well in a delicate way, saying that, hey, this feedback is there just for you to be aware and for you to know so that you can get better. And I'm happy to help you further. So I feel that is more genuine than sandwich, because after 3 sandwiches, the 4th sandwich, somebody's going to say,
yeah,
hey, that was a great presentation, and then he's going to say, well, it lacked this, it lacked that, it lacked this, and then in the end say, well, there were 35 people though. Yeah. So you actually are confused after that, because your human brain, especially if you're not taking notes like Pradeepa did, when you are driving back or you're thinking about it the next day, you're like, I'm confused. Did he say it was good or it was bad? Yeah. So yeah, anyway, so that's my point, is to seek permission to have that conversation.
Okay, Toby, here I would like to add one. I like that the setting the space between the 2 people, like asking the permission. So as an Agile coach, that's the first thing what we do to establish that connection first before we proceeding onto the feedback session. So during this entire conversation, so we this feedback, this word itself is overrated. So I never ever use that letter or word feedback in entire duration of my conversation with any candidates because it's overrated.
Can I give you a gift? Can I give you a gift? I use the word feed forward and I put it in the chat.
Yeah, I like that.
Feed forward. I say, hey, thinking forward, here's something that you can use in future. And people are a lot more receptive to feed forward than feedback, because feedback is, okay, something already happened and you're going to tell me about it. Yeah. But hey, next time you do that, maybe you want to have, less than 5 bullets on your slide, right? For example, and you said, because human brain cannot take more than 5 bullets at a time. I don't know, whatever you want to tell him or her, but you're saying in future, try this. And they are probably going to be more receptive to that.
Absolutely. See, another thing is, we are always talking about from the perspective of giving, right? I wanted to bring it back to, as a receiver, right? Like, how are you being open to receiving it? Because all these feed forward, feed through, there's so many feedback, right? There's so many fancy words out there. Yeah. We are always talking about, like, how do I do this for other people? How do I do this for other people? And I wanted to turn it back to us, right? Like, how are you role modeling it, right? Like, how are you receiving feedback? And the other, if you're putting a lot of pressure on other people sometimes, right? Like, this is how you have to give feedback. This is how it is not. It's an art. Definitely it's an art. But if you're role modeling it, like, okay, give it to me and I'm open to taking it. And of course, feedback is about, like, listening to what happened in the past and what are we going to do about it in the future, right? You have to act on it. If you're not act on it, then what's the point in receiving anything, right? And one other small thing that I wanted to share, it's a technique that I follow personally, is I have explicit agreements with everybody that I'm working with on what our feedback mechanism is going to be, right? How do I like to receive feedback? How do you like to receive feedback, right? We explicitly have an agreement on that and talk through that. What would it mean for both